perspective from Chris Swecker. Chris is a former assistant director of the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division, joins us now. Basically, two big questions. Jorge raised both for you. Number one, the significance of these arrests and what we know about El Mayo and also El Chapo's son.
Yeah, I mean, typically when you make a high-level arrest like this is one of the top leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo's organization. Things tend to get violent, even more violent than they are normally, and violence is the norm in Mexico. So when you take off a top cartel leader, the other leaders start vying for power, rivals start to move in, and it gets extremely bloody, like it can only in Mexico. But it's interesting to see how this developed. And one cartel snitching off the other. That happens all the time. They're always infiltrating each other's organizations and trying to do each other, damage the organizations in some way.
Right.
So this is an interesting development. It's a positive development. I'd like to see more arrests like this on these human trafficking and drug organizations.
Positive development mixed with that second question, which you alluded to, the possibility of it leading to some sort of a, as Jorge says, cartel war. And
right.
How does, from, I guess, history as a guide, would you say, what should we be looking at to maybe happen next year?
It's awful. I mean, you will see people hanging from overpasses, beheadings. This can only happen in Mexico, this type of violence. But mark this. The Mexican government is complicit in these drug cartel organizations. No question about it. Anybody who has worked drugs like I have, and as I did for so long
right.
on the Mexican border, and even before that in Miami when the action was in South Florida, knows that the Mexican government, that's the reason everything moved from South Florida out to Mexico, because they could compromise the Mexican government, get the routes established without any interference, buy off federales, buy off mayors and judicial police officers and government officials all the way up to the top. It is not a question of the government is helping the cartels. They're part of the cartels.
Man, so this is going to be a tense few weeks or months where you have to keep an eye, obviously, on this story. The timing of it, it does give us a chance to continue the conversation we're always having about the border more broadly. So I do want to ask you a question about that, because now we have a new race for president in the United States. There's been this back and forth about Vice President Kamala Harris, whether or not she was what they call the border czar. The Republicans say that was what she was supposed to do and she didn't do it, and the Democrats say no, that was never her responsibility. This is J.D. Vance earlier in the week. Listen.
Kamala Harris is America's border czar. And how's our border doing, ladies and gentlemen? She hasn't talked to the chief of Border Patrol a single time in her entire tenure as border czar. Remember, on her very first day in office, she and Biden suspended deportations. They stopped construction of the border wall, and they re-implemented catch and release. The border crisis is a Kamala Harris crisis.
Now, the Democrats all week have been saying something entirely different. I saw Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut, saying, no, she was just working on diplomacy in Central America. She created something where she convinced a number of companies to invest more money to bolster the economies down there. So they said, no, she was never the czar. How do you see this playing out? You have a lot of experience on the issue on the law enforcement side in the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, back in the 90s, NAFTA really enabled the cartels to become more powerful and get their drugs across the border very easily. Now we have open borders, and despite the most recent executive action, the cartels, the open borders have enabled the cartels to become the most powerful criminal organizations in the world. They are making billions and billions, and the open border did nothing but enable them. And they have infiltrated into the United States even more so than they did before. And there's no way to put this toothpaste back in the tube.
It's going to be a big issue in this campaign, and it's a big challenge for the vice president. She has had a good week politically, but This is the issue they're going to challenge her on when it's about the issues. Chris Swecker, good to see you. Thanks for coming on the show today. We appreciate it very much. Now, thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.